Kat Von D was once the pinnacle of celebrity brands and the catalyst to the rise of celebrity makeup brands during the 2010s. It was well branded, well targeted, and well distributed across America to much fanfare for years. But when the fanfare turned sour and they didn't do a good job at rebranding, the brand unfortunately became a mere shell of the powerhouse it once was. Kat Von D began as a celebrity line back in 2008 after Katherine von Drachenberg was approached by Sephora to do a limited collection. She'd become famed for her work on tattoo-themed reality TV shows Miami Ink. and LA Ink. And had gained a public persona from it, which according to this story told by the PR team later, the head of Sephora believed could be marketable. So, according to this story, in 2007, they physically went to her tattoo studio herself to meet with Kat Von D while she was working. Taking this story with a grain of salt, because they are using she/her pronouns, but the head of Sephora at the time was a man named David Solitano, allegedly, it was there that Drachenberg was offered to produce her own makeup line, which by the following year, 2008, would launch in Sephora stores across the country. However, despite the fact that this sounds like a simple celebrity line today, make no mistake that back in 2008, for Sephora, this brand was a real risk. She was a reality TV star at a time when that wasn't as widely praised. She had a much less squeaky clean aesthetic than other celebrities they could have worked with, and frankly, giving someone who doesn't have a background in cosmetic retailing almost free rein over what to produce is a risk in itself. Furthermore, the market at this time did not have a lot of celebrity makeup brands to use as a parameter for success. They did exist, Jessica Simpson and Iman both had lines, for example, but there was a notable lack of case studies for how this may pan out, which is a risk, despite it in hindsight being a blessing, as it meant that the venture didn't seem as much as a cash grab as we may skeptically see it as today. As a result, the debut was extremely well considered, consisting of only 4 red lipsticks, all themed heavily around Drachenberg's personal branding. They were packaged in darker, more edgy, black and white tattoo-esque printed packaging in designs Drachenberg had drawn herself, which both helped them stand out on the shelves and capitalized on what fans would be looking for from a collection from Kat Von D. But interestingly, going into the history of Sephora, we know that just before this, in 2006, they'd signed a deal with JCPenney and they were looking for ways to entice new customers into stores. And with Kat Von D, what they were discovering was there was a fandom effect of having a celebrity as a persona that created a branding opportunity to drive consumers into storefronts, remedying the all too difficult question of how to increase foot traffic the nation over. And in doing so, the collection did phenomenally well. It had both great desirability and great sales, potentially becoming one of their top 5 brands sold in its first year, and warranted a decent expansion on the line to include 2 eyeshadow palettes, brushes coined as tattoo tools, 5 lip glosses, and even 2 different perfumes named Saint and Sinner, all by the following year of 2009. Obviously, seeing this incredible and quite unexpected success, LVMH planned to put more eggs into this celebrity basket, and began their own incubator brand named Kendo in order to both create more profitable partnerships like this one and also to extend the life of Kat Von D Beauty. Not the first product, but the first hit product I believe they came out with under Kendo was this Tattoo Chronicles palette Volume 1, and it included fake eyelashes, 12 eyeshadows, 3 eyeshadow primers, and even a rollable perfume, which I believe was both of her fragrances, Saint and Sinner. But again, what's very interesting about this set was that not only was it an amalgamation of the Kat Von D brand thus far, making it the perfect Christmas gift, but also it played very hard into the celebrity aspect, featuring Drachenberg's eye, her illustrations, letters she had written by hand, and even each product right from the very beginning were named after things truly personal to her or that went with her specific brand of edgy branding. It was an incredibly personal way to brand a product, playing into that parasocial relation that's all too important for a celebrity brand. In short, they harnessed her fandom into a commercial group by giving them a way to signal their likes and interests in a way that they just hadn't been able to before. Quickly, the brand became one of the hottest products to have in the growing YouTube makeup space. Video upon video of tutorials on how to get the Kat Von D look cropped up, and even individual products were majorly popularized. They released more and more products, from palettes to perfumes, to meet demand, and soon Drachenberg herself hopped on the trend by making makeup tutorial videos for Sephora. So, the brand was heavily tied, and purposefully so, to Kat Von D, the person. Prior to the Kendo erection, Sephora had only ran operations and marketing, having a coordinating role in the products. But since the recontract now with Kendo, they very likely had more of a hand in the product development, despite the shared ownership status of the business. This is important because at this time, Drachenberg was not only the aesthetic inspiration for the products, but also still the owner of the name Kat Von D, something we know from her other licenses. This is really important, as not too long after Kendo's founding, Kat Von D would go through a very long personal controversy that included her and her boyfriend at the time, Jesse James, being accused of Nazi sympathizing in 2010 and 2011 after images surfaced of her with a swastika on her arm and a signature of hers with offensive anti-Semitic text was released to the public. She did say that this was a forgery in this TMZ interview at the time, but of course, regardless of the truth, the story would famously follow her. This really was the beginning of Kat Von D experiencing the biggest risk of a celebrity brand. When one is so heavily entwined with the company, any personal scandals can greatly impact sales, regardless of their validity. Fortunately for the brand, the concept of cancelling someone hadn't yet been popularized, so they came out of this scandal not too worse for wear, but it well foreshadows the controversies to come. You see, by 2013, the makeup brand would have its own scandal, this one for the naming of a lipstick using a portmanteau of celebrity and an offensive slur for disabled folk, and unfortunately the responses from the corporate side, i.e. Sephora, and from the public side, i.e. Drachenberg, were notably different. Drachenberg was first to comment, replying to a tweet by dismissing the controversy entirely because it's only a lipstick, while Sephora took a few days but ultimately pulled the product from shelves after the controversy failed to subside and provided this as a statement. It's come to our attention that the name of one shade of lipstick we carry has caused offense to some of our clients and others. We are deeply sorry for that. And yet, the controversy wouldn't stop there. Sources like USA Today and the LA Times noted other lipsticks in the range had names like Backstage Bambi, Hellbent, Lolita, and Underage Red, with the last two being hemophilic for their references to the sexualization of minors, obviously in the terms underage, and Lolita, which is a reference to the 1955 horror novel by Vladimir Nabokov, in which a middle-aged male protagonist lusts over a 12-year-old child. However, in regards to Lolita, the media had somewhat changed the horror aspect of the book after the 1997 movie and even the 2012 song by Lana Del Rey to portray it as more of an aesthetic world instead of the horror that it was intended as, something Nabokov had been vocal about prior, not wanting any depiction of the girl on the cover of his books, for example, and so as a result, it can be understood how Lolita could have passed quality control. But with the addition of Underage Red, it unfortunately becomes harder to deny that they weren't trying to be shocking in order to garner attention, which in fact was a very popular marketing technique in the 2010s. As a result, these controversies again weren't large enough to hinder the brand and only really helped it become more well-known, which ultimately is the goal of shock marketing. In fact, it wasn't even until 2015 that the Underage Red shade would once again come under fire, and the discrepancy between corporate and public response would again prove to be difficult after Drachenberg penned a 700-word Facebook message attempting to absolve herself. In it, She details how she is the sole individual to choose the names of the products and asks no hate to be aimed towards Sephora. She says how she just chooses the names for the aesthetic of them and that she doesn't endorse any kind of degradation of women or harmful behavior whatsoever. However, to end the post, she then says how she will not be pulling Underage Red off of shelves as they did with previous scandalous named products because she doesn't want to compromise her creative freedom in a manner that seems somewhat angry and unbecoming. Furthermore, unfortunately, we do know that Sephora had always had a corporate attention on the project, as coordinator Christine Otto pointed out from the very first 2008 collaboration. So, even if she did conceive the names just for the aesthetic, it's likely that they still would have been a team in Kendo that would have had the power to reject her ideas. And besides, we also know now from a future scandal, she actually just didn't have the power to pull different products off of the shelves, even if she wanted to. It's not solely her company after all. But then, why would they? The shock marketing tactic had clearly worked, and Lolita had become Sephora's top-selling lipstick in the whole of 2015. And in the future, in 2018, would be the name of a full collection, so they really had no motivation to stop the attempts at shock marketing, being needlessly provocative, or at least not stopping Drachenberg's public controversial behaviors. Which is how we were then led to the following year and the infamous feud with now ex-friend Jeffree Star. Following an Instagram and Twitter beef with her friend Jeffree Star, in which she accused him of not paying their mutual friend BJ for designing his logos, Drachenberg posted a 14-minute-long video on Facebook distancing herself from him, going over her evidence as to why she believed he was not paying BJ, and then quite a few personal attacks also with how he deals with people and with fans. This, in the YouTube space, was major news. Probably the biggest feud cosmetic enthusiasts had seen at this time, especially because Jeffree had his own successful YouTube channel as an influencer and brand owner all in one. So, when he responded with his own video, a video which now has 15 million views, going over why Drachenberg was mistaken, it created a rift in beauty where consumers felt the need to pick a side, either Team Kat Von D or Team Jeffree Star, splitting their often shared consumer base in half. But in the end, controversy of this scale, one that is divisive with no clear winner or loser, instead of really doing any damage, just helped to grow the profile of the Kat Von D brand. As a result, they just kept growing, and by the following year, they had a collaboration with Too Faced, launched to much fanfare in the UK and Ireland in Debenhams in the September of 2016, and by February 2017 was also launched in France, with this huge shopfront display announcing the launch and enticing customers to come in. By the following year, they had a few extra scandals, again neither of which having a huge impact, but by 2019, the buzz around the brand just really seemed to subside rather quickly, and it seemed that their time in the sun had passed. There really wasn't a harsh downfall of the company. They had had a few scandals and that had turned off a few people, sure, specifically the anti-vax and the resurfacing and addition to the anti-Semitic scandal that we covered earlier were rather damaging. But it was not only the scandals that caused the company into the lull it's seeing now. Instead, it just seemed like they had reached the end of the product lifecycle, and without a new hit product in a long while to be used as a brand extender, there were just other, more exciting brands on the market. While her personal scandals could be used more of as an excuse to justify why customers had lost their taste for the now 11-year-old brand. So, the brand was at a true low point. Significantly less articles were written about their products, and in general the discourse around the brand just wasn't positive. Thus, when it was announced that Drachenberg would sell her shares, taking her name with her, it was considered about the right time. But considering that Drachenberg still owns the name Kat Von D, the brand was then forced to rebrand, and within just 4 days had become known as KVD Vegan Beauty, which initially with a lighter pink tone began as KVD, standing for kindness, vegan beauty and discovery, and doing good, in that order. Though a year later, in 2021, they announced the KVD now stood for Cara, Veritas and Decora, with a return to the darker aesthetic that did well for the Kat Von D brand before it. Though obviously both of these are just a way to get around the intellectual property rights, as they clearly didn't change too much outside of the logo. And unfortunately, as a result, neither brand really hit the zeitgeist, and in fact searches for the brand fell by 55.3% year on year, 2 years after the initial rebrand. Personally, I would put this down to the rebrand simply failing to actualize what I assumed was its main goal. One would assume that when rebranding, in order to distance themselves from the liability of a celebrity name, the brand would want to do what they could to make that distance clear while not alienating the remaining customers. On one hand, the first pink rebrand did well at distancing from Drachenberg, but missed out on something familiar to retain that remaining customer. And the second did exactly the opposite. Using a similar Gothic-inspired Latin name and branding, did well to retain customers, but unfortunately by using the same initials and keeping a very similar anarchic visual language, they didn't really distance themselves much from the celebrity Katherine von Drachenberg whatsoever, leaving them very susceptible to her ongoing personal scandals, namely her conversion to Christianity, which left very many confused and skeptical, and the controversy that came up over the homophobic and transphobic accounts that she had been engaging with on Instagram. This then weighs onto the brand as a liability, while Drachenberg really has no responsibility to uphold their image or branding anymore. Basically, it's a lose-lose situation for the company, where the brand is still aligned with someone going through a personal controversy, where if her conversion to Christianity is true, then it discredits the authenticity of the brand, despite her not being connected with it anymore, and if it's fake, then it just offends a large religious group of people. This then leaves the KVD vegan beauty brand in an unfortunate situation in which they're subject to whatever Drachenberg does, despite buying her out specifically to rid themselves of this liability. In short, it's a very foolish rebrand because it isn't clear enough and it just didn't work. From here, I expect the brand will try to very slowly turn itself around, pushing forward with the influencer marketing that we've already seen them do fairly well towards a much younger audience on TikTok, which honestly I suppose we should have seen coming since the launch in 2020 in Ulta. But I'm honestly expecting something to come in and just change things up. LVMH, who owns both Kendo and Sephora, aren't necessarily known for closing brands lightly and can afford to keep one of their biggest cosmetic earners open for a few years until it finds its feet. So that's personally what I'm expecting to see maybe in the next 5 years, and honestly I think they've got a great aesthetic foundation to go off of. If it was done well, they could definitely see a comeback. It's just that day is certainly not yet happened. That day is not today. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe and hit the notification bell for more videos like this one. Check out my fashion channel for videos like this but about fashion brands, and a special thank you goes to my patrons who support me over on Patreon, some of whose names are on the screen now. Also, sorry if my voice is a bit hoarse in this video. I've been very sick recently, so I hope it wasn't too much of a distraction.